Well, it's time for part 2 of the Week 12 preview here on the Audible. It's Kansas City and it's Carolina. Interesting things going on with both. Let's just talk about the potential return, maybe sometime, of Isaiah Pacheco. All right, so we've got some news on him day to day. Looks like they play the Raiders on Black Friday, so Week 13 is when they could bring back Pacheco. So rest for one more week. That means Kareem Hunt for one more week. By the way, Marquise Brown could be back for the postseason, as they expect, and everyone should expect them to make a deep postseason run. Other than that, your Carolina doesn't have the edge presence that you need to beat KC. You want to beat KC, have edge presence. Well, they don't, so KC should roll, Bloom. I should learn how to speak English, but KC should roll.
Yes, but this is a Kansas City team that is content to win ugly. So if this was Detroit, Cease, we would project 45-3. Because it's Kansas City, it might be 16-3.
Right.
They're not going to put the foot on the gas pedal in terms of this offense. Like you said, we got to monitor Isaiah Pacheco. If Pacheco is active and expected to play, and this is one of those ones where we're going to listen to Rap Sheet and Schefter and everybody talk about, well, what's the expectation for how much work Pacheco will get? We don't want to play Pacheco, but that could keep us from playing Kareem Hunt. Chances are, if there's touchdowns in this game, they're most likely to go to Kareem Hunt. So it's not like Patrick Mahomes is a good play, even though this is a good matchup. And then you look at his targets when now Juju's back. DeAndre Hopkins and Noah Gray's catching touchdowns instead of Travis Kelce. Even Travis Kelce's not truly a safe play in this game, because it wouldn't be surprising if the passing game is put on mothballs after 20 attempts for 120 yards and maybe a touchdown. Because like we're talking about, don't think that, and maybe Xavier Worthy, maybe that's the one exception, because it only takes one play for Worthy, so you just need one Carolina breakdown. And you did see in the first half last week an emphasis on Worthy. That's when he got all of his receiving stats. So maybe Worthy is the exception. But Cease, you might have circled this and said, "Ooh, Kansas City bonanza," and we're here. It doesn't feel so exciting.
No, not really, because again, they're content with winning ugly. Now, Carolina side is interesting. Jonathan Brooks returning to the field, set to make his debut. Dave Canales saying Brooks expected to make his debut in Week 12 against the Chiefs. He's an amazing talent. We're super excited to see him play,
Yeah.
but Chuba Hubbard's there. So it's like, all right, I guess now it's time for Adam Thielen talk and running back by committee talk as well with this Panthers team.
Yeah, the one exciting thing about this offense was Chuba Hubbard, and Chuba Hubbard got that extension. Good for him. I mean, let's take a couple of human stories and put them front and center. One, again, even though we're like, oh, Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks, fantasy lens. Jonathan Brooks could be one of the great running backs of this generation. Okay, and we're about to see his debut, and that's awesome. That's exciting, and he could really. Chances are, I think he'll look so good that people will say, why did they sign Hubbard to an extension? Well, Hubbard has earned that. And like you said, Cease, we're looking at a committee backfield. And because of the matchup, because of the likely game script, Carolina will stick with the run. I mean, Hubbard is a what the heck flex. But this is that litmus test of, well, what do we have if we have Hubbard for the rest of the season? And then you add Adam Thielen back in and Bryce Young. And that's another human story here for Bryce Young, hopefully to build confidence either for this team or another team in the future. He's not as bad as the quarterback we've seen so far in his Carolina career. Okay. Just want to see him build on that momentum, but to who? To Thielen, to Leggett, to Coker. Again, it's Kansas City. It's a good defense. Or Jatavian Sanders as a desperation tight end. This is one of those games that is probably going to be over. I feel sorry for people that have paid money for a ticket to this game, unless they're Chiefs fans living in North Carolina and South Carolina.
Yeah, unless they won the tickets. On
Yeah.
the radio, Titans and Texans up next, and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Again, when you said him on the waiver show a few weeks ago, I was like, oh, whoops. Yeah, he's doing it and doing it well. With Tyjae Spears banged up, then Tony Pollard, Will Levis almost hit 300. Like, is there a little something maybe with your Titans this week?
Maybe, if he throws 55 times like Cooper Rush did, there could be something. I guess that's really the question we're going to answer is how big is the gap between Cooper Rush and Will Levis? But when we watch Levis against this Houston defense that shut down Cooper Rush, except for a Cavante Turpin long play. You mentioned Nick Westbrook-Akina, his 98-yard touchdown, bulking up those stats for Levis. Again, I'll be in a tough matchup against Minnesota. You're probably not going to want to go with Levis. I think Ridley's done enough across quarterbacks that he's a wide receiver 3 flex. It's a rough week at wide receiver, okay? One of the things is you might think about your wide receivers in a vacuum and say, I don't know if I want to play this guy. And then you look at who you have and look at who's on bye and you say, I guess I'm playing this guy. So Calvin Ridley's fine this week. Tyjae Spears, watch and see about the concussion. Poor guy just can't stay healthy. So Tony Pollard almost by default becomes a flex just because you say, well, he'll get 15 touches. He'll get 18 touches in this game. And Tennessee has a chance. Is it controlling your destiny if you lose out? You get the number 1 pick. Is that controlling your destiny in the 2024 NFL? We asked that question. Houston definitely controls their destiny in this division.
Yeah, Joe Mixon controls your soul.
Yeah.
Give him 40 carries.
Sure.
Let's just see if we can break him. Again, a little worried about that, but still. And Nico Collins just needs Laramie Tunsil not to hold.
Right.
And then he'll be back big time in the box score. But let's talk about those Texans at home. Looking to get not an easy one, but looking to get that win.
The Texans are in an enviable position where they can really start tuning up the team for January. I mean, they still have to win games they're supposed to win, like this game, but everything's starting to come back together. Nico Collins, they're not going to get Stephon Diggs back, but they get Collins back. Dell, these guys have to be in the lineup. You hope that they do enough before this game gets out of hand, because as you said, Cease, it's all Joe Mixon. When we reflect on this, and it may well end up being Joe Mixon is the most valuable player in fantasy football. And I don't mean because he was a 4th, 5th round pick. I just mean the most valuable player in fantasy football. We're on the verge of that happening. And I guess that we have to give a nod. See, we've been talking about all these bad organizations all year, but the Texans have really executed an incredible 180. I mean, turning around a cruise ship at a point when they were an organization that we would have said is a trash organization. And this is where trash organizations end up with some of the decisions they've made. And this Joe Mixon decision to give him an extension in the offseason, we're like, 28, it looked like Cincinnati was really ready to move on from him. You're extending him? Yeah, give the Texans the nod there. Give the nod to anybody who has him on their fantasy team. And this team basically has a 3-game lead. So again, this is about where they started, even without Stephon Diggs, who signified we're going for the Super Bowl, but they're going for the Super Bowl. And this is a tune-up game against a team that wants that number 1 pick.
We are going to Vegas next because it is time for Broncos and Raiders. Broncos have never won in Vegas.
Wow.
Hell, they hadn't beaten the Vegas Raiders until earlier this year. They were the last team to beat the Oakland Raiders. Hadn't beat the Vegas Raiders, but they beat them earlier. Probably going to beat them again. But from a fantasy lens, okay, Bo Nix with top 12 fantasy quarterback potential. He needs to use his legs more, but hell,
Yeah.
Last week it was 300 yards, 80% completion, and 4 touchdowns. But you might be chasing ghosts because you're not starting Nate Adkins or Little Jordan Humphrey, right? Maybe Marvin Mims moves into what the heck flex territory. Cortland Sutton is wide receiver 2 territory. Josh Reynolds is practicing. His window has been open, but he's not yet been activated. So we'll continue to put a pin in that. But his second favorite target for Bo Nix might be a first-year player in Devon Vele, but he's what the heck flex 2.
Right.
And then the backfield is just all full of what the heck flexes because of the hot hand approach. So yay, running back by committee.
Yeah, a very successful season for the Broncos, but for fantasy, not a lot of clarity in the backfield among the wide receivers other than Cortland Sutton. And this is a good moment also, Cease, to say, I don't know if it was Sutton-driven or team-driven, but that this marriage stay together has been great for both sides and great for fantasy players who took Cortland Sutton, who is a true number 1 receiver, and Bo Nix is giving him number 1 receiver targets, and he's the one guy we can trust. And then it's a cast of thousands, and any of them could score a touchdown because it's the Raiders. So that all points back to Bo Nix. Bo Nix being a good play. See, how could we have envisioned 3 months into Bo Nix's career, we're talking about him like, well, yeah, he's a solid quarterback 1 for fantasy football.
Yeah.
Here we are, at least when you're playing the Raiders.
Yeah, when you're playing the Raiders, and who's going to be in at running back? Okay, Brock Bowers, yes, and you imagine that with Gardner Minshew in there, Pat Surtain's going to be patrolling around. Maybe he gets another pick six. It's like 90 yards or whatever it was in the last game.
Mhm.
And then who's running the ball? Like seriously, who's running the ball? Because Madison ankle, Zamir White quadriceps, and I guess maybe it doesn't matter because it's the Broncos defense. But yeah, it's the Raiders, so don't look for a lot of fantasy help here.
No, except from Brock Bowers.
Brock
Uh,
Bowers.
Gardner Minshew knows just throw the ball to Brock Bowers. And Jacoby Myers, again, because it's a rough week at wide receiver, and I don't see Jacoby Myers as the kind of receiver that's going to be static like Terry McLaurin with Quinyon Mitchell, where Patrick Surtain can just blot out Jacoby. If anything, you put Surtain on Bowers. That would be the matchup I want to see. That's the must-see TV here if you're looking at Vance Joseph and what he's going to do. So, hey, this is going to be maybe Dylan Laubie's game. That's the other thing. We're in that part of the season now where deep dynasty rosters. This is why you want to play in these 16-team leagues with 53-man rosters and full IDP lineups, because you care about these guys, because you're interested to see Dylan Laubie's going to get some sort of opportunity, and he is the kind of player that, because of his advanced receiving ability, Matt Waldman favorite, and let's face it, this is a wide open backfield. It's maybe a 1% chance or a 3% chance, but we could be talking about Laubie the way we were talking about Austin Eckler, where we're saying, okay, he's going to be part of this backfield. Like, we've seen enough from him this year that we know going forward, their backfield plan includes him. Jaleel McLaughlin plus, okay, depending on what he does starting in this game. So it makes it exciting for the kid from New Hampshire.
Yes. How about the kids from San Francisco against Green Bay as our next game up? It's part 2 of the Week 12 preview here on the Audible. And the 49ers side, George Kittle with the hamstring. We're watching that, of course, out last week. Emergency. They went to Eric Salbert. He had a catch. So I still appreciate when he almost ran me over at the Shrine game practices years and years ago. But either way, like, you're not starting Eric Sauber. You're starting Christian McCaffrey. He didn't practice Wednesday. It's just he's not going to practice Wednesday. Brock Purdy and the 49ers need to get on the winning track. Well, this time they got to start that Bloom on the road against Green Bay.
And this matchup sees, I think, of some pretty emotionally draining playoff games between these two teams.
Yep.
And speaking of emotionally draining, this season, and we'll talk about fantasy, but what's fascinating to me here, Cease, is that this season for San Francisco, with all of the very winnable games they have lost, now in week 12 is in urgent red alert, like kind of like every game's. I mean, look, they're 5-6. I'm not saying every game is a must win, but if you even just look at San Francisco's next 3 games, you are going to see, for this San Francisco team that, was a play away from winning the Super Bowl, because after this game, they have to go to Buffalo, and then Chicago is going to come to Santa Clara. Then they have the Rams. Then they have to go to Miami. Then they have Detroit. And then they finish at Arizona. There's not a gimme left on their schedule. And they're 5-6 after they lose this game. So this is a different place. This team definitely is in a moment, in a tough place to win against a good team. Brock Purdy doesn't look healthy, at least by some folks' estimation. He is on the injury report with a shoulder. You're seeing his passing efficiency. Is it because George Kittle's out? Is it because Trent Williams is banged up? Well, look, if we're trying to answer this offense, these questions in the affirmative, we don't like how many of these things are starting to pile up now, right? Brock Purdy has a shoulder. Kittle, he's going to play. He's going to be in your lineup. He's got a hamstring, though. Trent Williams, probably not 100%. And Green Bay can have a brutal pass rush at times. So yeah, Brock Purdy's been running around, but this is going to be something to watch. You're going to play Christian McCaffrey. You're going to play Juwan Jennings. And I like taking these moments out to be like, think about time traveling from August to say, well, yeah, by week 12, we're going to say, well, of course you play Juwan Jennings. That's the number 1 receiver for the 49ers. Everybody knows that. That's what the NFL does to us over the course of a season. So Juwan Jennings is in, but Deebo Samuel, you probably have to play because of the thin wide receiver group this week. But again, he's not. You had like one busted coverage play against Arizona. I mean, there's not a lot happening for him in terms of the big plays we're looking for from this offense. And see, that's why when I think about this game, I think about the Green Bay Chicago game last week or the San Francisco Seattle game. You don't even have to stretch to say this is a game that's going to be like, 17-13, 20-17, not a lot of offense, a lot of physical play, and a lot on the line.
A lot on the line. And the Green Bay Packers, a lot of receiving choices, like a lot of receivers that we love. Christian Watson going to go off again. Jaden Reed find the end zone. Wicks, nothing. Romeo, nothing. Could you get a little something? By the way, my guy Marshawn Lloyd now on NFI.
Appendicitis?
Yeah.
You bloomed him.
I hate it. Hate that. Anyway, still love him in Dynasty. Play Dynasty Fantasy Football, everybody. Let's talk about the Packers and the multiple ways that they can get at you at home against 49ers.
Yeah, or we're going to talk about those ways. Are we going to talk about those ways? Because Jordan Love getting loose with the ball, and yes, he did have an interception last week in the red zone, but otherwise it was a pretty clean game for him because he only threw the ball 17 times. And you wonder, see, if there is not some merging going on of like the Malik Willis game plan and the Jordan Love game plan. Why not? Why not limit the pass attempts to 20, 25 attempts? Josh Jacobs looks ready, right? Josh Jacobs looks ready. Like, just strap this offense to his back and he's going to pull this offense. And again, San Francisco's offense isn't scaring you. Green Bay's defense, if they can get something sorted out, linebacker can be a very good defense. And we've seen them be a very good defense. So I think it's a Josh Jacobs game. Jordan Love, not an automatic play. Out of these pass catchers, I guess Jaden Reed because of his ceiling and Christian Watson because of his ceiling, but know that, and Tucker Kraft, I guess, because of, again, the potential for ceiling plays. But we're going to watch this game to see, is the template for this Green Bay offense going forward a very run-heavy offense and a conservative offense where Jordan Love will get chances to take shots downfield, and he'll have a few plays where he can definitely try to make some things happen like he has all year, but cut down on the bad things happening, because otherwise this team is a tough out if Jordan Love isn't making unforced errors. So I'm going to be watching that real closely in this really intriguing matchup.
Okay, 4 games down, 3 games to go. Part 2, week 12, Arizona and Seattle is our next game that we're going to talk about. On the Arizona side, the Kyler Murray pizza thing was funny. I don't know if you saw that, Bloom. It was in New York City, and I think a guy from Sweden was like eating pizza and recording him like, "Hey, what's your name?" And Kyler was like, "Kyler." All right, well, the name you need to know for your fantasy lineup, yeah, maybe, is Kyler. And then all the Arizona assets, still love me some Trey Benson. So let's talk about it. This time on the road against Seattle in a divisional matchup.
Yeah, and Seattle, they're in that must-win zone. But Arizona, now granted, you look at the NFC West standings, and I've been talking about it a lot this week, Cease, but I want to focus on it because this is awesome. Let's enjoy this moment. Let's breathe this in. We have a 6-4 Arizona team and 3 5-5 teams. Again, the best team over the last 7 weeks of the season is going to win this division, and it starts in this game. And Arizona was the best team in this division going into their bye. And what a sweet spot to be in, where you're going into your bye with your offense surging, with your defense surging, with all of your key players healthy. So this is a bye where you just say, well, we're not going to really adjust anything. We're not going to really, like, we don't want to, if it ain't broke, right? Not only is it not broke, it's coming together. So this offense, Kyler Murray had his best game of the season going in. Seattle, a very game effort against San Francisco, but we know the Seattle defense can also be very vulnerable. So you love Kyler Murray this week. You love James Conner, who's rested now. This is probably going to be the best season of his career, isn't it? And stats, whatever stats.
I thought that was last year.
Right? But
doing it again.
And he's doing it on a winning team. And he's part of why they're a winning team. It's great seeing him get this late in his career. Again, it's the season of the late career running back. And Marvin Harrison Jr., it's a tough matchup. Witherspoon and Woolen, it's a tough matchup. They've got the length, they've got the physicality, they've got the strength to hang with him. But you still got to play him. But could this maybe be a big Trey McBride game? And then you mentioned Trey Benson. Things are coming together for him. And I'm not saying this is going to turn to a committee backfield, but Benson could be a good enough running back that if he's getting 8, 10, 12 touches a game because they're a winning team. He gets into what the heck flex territory, and obviously he might be the number one backup running back to have right now, just because of James Conner's injury history, the quality of this team, the quality of his play. And yeah, Seattle got unbelievable divisional win. They needed it. I mean, they're in that part of the season where if they had lost that game, if Geno Smith doesn't scramble and get that last second touchdown against San Francisco, you're saying, well, Seattle, like the season's slipping away. Now, for Seattle, if they can beat Arizona, who was the best team in the division going into last week, they're tied for first, and their season is not only slipping away, it's very much alive.
Yeah, and how do they do that? Little Geno, little DK, little Walker, right? I know Tyler Lockett had the day off on Wednesday. I was like, I thought his days off were Sundays. These are the jokes, everybody. Let's talk Seattle side.
I thought you were going to say a lot of Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mean, that's where it's all headed, right? We're watching a number one receiver being born over these last few weeks. And the nice thing is Geno Smith will throw and throw and throw. Geno Smith is not shy about letting it go. So you're loving if you have Jackson Smith and Jigba. Smith and Jigba could be one of the 5, 7 most valuable wide receivers for the rest of the season. Especially if these game scripts keep up where Geno is throwing a lot, trying to keep this team in the game. Of course, DK Metcalf is back. He's in. And this could be a Kenneth Walker game. You talk about that physicality, that the point of the spear that James Conner provides for Arizona. Kenneth Walker, when he's on, he does that for Seattle. We haven't seen Seattle's offense fully come into focus the same way we saw Arizona's offense the last few weeks. Maybe Arizona's defense also puts their stamp on this game, a no-name defense that is really coming on. And even for fantasy football, you want to take heed of this defense, as Geno Smith can definitely turn into a turnover fest when he's playing from behind. So again, another intriguing matchup. See, we're in that time of the season when destinies are being forged, not just for our fantasy teams.
Yeah, and one of them is next up, Philadelphia and the LA Rams. Got a couple of nice ones here at the end, so let's talk about it. Philadelphia side, Saquon Barkley, stop getting stopped at the 1. But there you go. Slim Reaper, a little bit of hamstring, is that right? Jalen Hurts with an ankle. So a couple things to watch for Friday's practice report. But Philadelphia is rolling, and this time to the West Coast.
The Eagles having one of those seasons where you might have said, well, who have they beat? They're in a pretender division. But by the time we get to the playoffs, this team could be a handful. Really, in the NFC side, we're just asking who can really give Detroit a run for their money in the playoffs. Philadelphia is coming around, and this is a good yardstick game for them, although we never know what we're going to get with the Rams. But at home on a Sunday night, Sean McVay will probably have them ready. Saquon Barkley is just soaring right now. He's just soaring. And I don't even care about the fantasy stats, Cease. We've watched football together now and talked about it for almost 20 years, strictly from a physical standpoint. And I don't want to make it sound like it's just physical gifts, because you don't get the physical gifts developed to the point that Saquon Barkley has developed them without work. And you don't bring them to bear in the context of a game the way he does every week, seemingly, unless you're an inspired player. Like integrated, the it factor, Matt Waldman, integrated technique. He looks like the most physically gifted running back we've seen, period. Unless you can remember watching like Jim Brown, he's on a completely different level physically than other NFL players, which is astounding because these are some of the most finely tuned physical specimen in the world. And Saquon Barkley is turning it into his show. So let's just enjoy that. And we'll get to enjoy that on Sunday night. And then Hurts to A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert. And with Devontae Smith, you have this hamstring, you have Dallas Goedert, you have a thin target tree as it is. So I understand. And again, this week it's tough to say, well, I'm going to break ties against some of these receivers who are definitely not coming in with momentum. Devontae Smith is not right now. You might have to play him, but you won't be surprised if he doesn't do much in this game despite a good matchup.
Yeah, Rams side is fairly simple. Cooper and Puka and Kyron and Stafford, dash Blake Corum. Maybe it's like a crazy what the heck flex. We'll see. But Rams are feeling it.
Yeah.
They're feeling it at home. They got a tough matchup this time against Philly.
Yeah, exactly. And again, what's exciting here for fantasy, the Rams are simple. And let's take a moment to say again, See, how many times over the years have we said, how did the league let the Eagles get this guy in the draft? This was just some player just falls to them. It was Quinyon Mitchell this time, and Mitchell has already looks like a number one shutdown corner. Washington, Cliff Kingsbury did not really move Terry McLaurin around. I think Sean McVay will have a plan to make sure that Mitchell isn't always on Puka Nacua. So I'm not worried about playing Nacua. I'm not worried about playing Cup. Matthew Stafford isn't a slam dunk. He's been up and down, very matchup dependent, and Vic Fangio has this Eagles defense playing well. Kyron's fading. You still got to play him, but he's not getting the touchdowns. He's not getting the receptions right now. But this is a very much alive Rams team. It's funny that the Rams and the Bengals met in the Super Bowl East, because I think they both stand for the proposition that they may not make the playoffs, but if they make the playoffs, they can beat anybody in the playoffs. And this is a playoff team in the Eagles they're facing, and they're going to have to beat them to continue to stay in playoff contention.
Yeah, and Howie rung up quite a few teams for Quinyon, and then got him anyway.
Yeah, love it when that happens in a fantasy draft.
Except Howie, because he's addicted to trade. I would have liked to trade.
Right. Anyway. It feels better with the trade. More endorphins, more dopamine.
Final game we're going to talk about. You got some endorphins here in the playoff preview. Baltimore and the LA Chargers. Again, for fantasy, Baltimore is pretty easy to figure out. Everyone except for Deontay Johnson. But Jim Harbaugh and company, those Chargers, they're going to have something drawn up for them. So let's talk Ravens football and how they'll attack. And again, this is a playoff preview right here.
Yeah, everyone's dunking on Deontay Johnson. I mean, even his own coach, we're pretty good with the guys we have out there, and not even saying that he's just telling the truth, but you don't have to tell the truth when you're talking about the public view of a player. Baltimore is, against these, I feel this theme emerging where, and we know it's a game of inches, and we know there's the oblong ball factor, and there's the refs, and there's all kinds of stuff that can happen with a football game. But we're getting to that point in the season where these coaches, these organizations, these players have invested so much, and they had so many hopes for the season. And now we're going to start seeing how it's really going to go. And for the Ravens, this is a tough game. This is a really tough game going to face the Chargers. And the Steelers beat the Chargers. So you lose this game, this is how it starts to stack up, where whether you're going to be on the road in a wild card game or hosting a playoff game, or maybe even have a bye. So Baltimore losing a lot of winnable games, and now, like last week, and now they find themselves, if the Steelers win on Thursday and they lose this game, the odds of them winning the division gets a lot longer. This is a game that has some meaning for them. And yeah, like you said, Cease, for fantasy, Lamar to Zay Flowers, Lamar to Mark Andrews, a lot of Derrick Henry. But you have to imagine that the Chargers defense will match Henry's physical intensity, which is how the Steelers came out, getting that fumble right away, establishing, first round, ding, ding. I'm not only not afraid of getting punched by you, but I'm going to land some punches myself. So I think you're going to see the Chargers come out with that mentality against Derrick Henry. I think it's going to be a very entertaining game. And depending on how Justin Herbert plays, we could see a game where, like the Steelers and the Ravens, the defenses dictate things. It stays a low scoring game. Or we could see a classic quarterback duel if Justin Herbert, that we've seen sometimes, shows up on Sunday night.
Yeah, when he has to.
Yeah.
Jim Harbaugh's like, okay, kid, go win it. So if he has to, how's that turn into points for your fantasy squad with your Chargers?
Right. Ladd McConkey. Will Disley. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And even Quentin Johnson and Joshua Palmer as what the heck flex types, because we know this Ravens secondary is vulnerable. And for fantasy terms, we have two potential blow-up games. We have the Detroit-Indy game, and that just comes down to Anthony Richardson. If Anthony Richardson can land some counter punches in between Detroit just matriculating up and down the field, then that game, we could be looking at 80, 90 points in that game. And this game could become an 80 or 90 point game if Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry can loosen up the Chargers. And then that puts Justin Herbert, as we saw him in the first half last week, not so much in the second half, but he sometimes can just make it look easy out there. And with these receivers who are very physically talented. And then there's the J.K. Dobbins revenge game. Is he wearing down a little bit? He did get that game-winning touchdown last week, but otherwise wasn't that effective. Got Gus Edwards, another revenge game to take a little bit more off the plate. But again, you wonder if in the big scheme of things, is the running game even going to matter? Because this feels like a game that's going to come down to quarterbacks. And that's the AFC playoff bracket for you. And this one's going to maybe determine how the wild card plays shake out as these two teams are jockeying for position to get one of the easier matchups in the wild card round of the road teams. Again, that's what the Ravens are looking at if they can't win.
You are jockeying for position in your fantasy league, and we are here to help. It is the Audible. Make sure to subscribe to all of our YouTube channels, Fantasy Football Channel, Dynasty Channel, and the Audible channel right here for you. All the goodness that you want in one spot. It's here on YouTube. Watch the videos. Follow Sigmund on the socials at Sigmund Bloom. I'm at Cecil Lamy. The show is at the Audible, saying thanks for watching, everyone. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty.